right, welcome everyone. I also want to welcome everyone in the room and also everyone at home. I want to remind everyone at home that you can ask questions on Slido, which you find in the links below. Remember that this is room blue, and you can ask your questions there during the talk, after the talk, and our signal angel will ask these questions in the Q&A for you. Then I would like to introduce Thomas and Lukas, who built the game Unrailed during the Game Lab course here at ETH. The game is a lot of fun. That's why it also got published later. It is so much fun that people have been urging me to play it for half a year now, and I still haven't played it, and which is more for my lack of time than the lack of fun, as I heard. So now they will present the post-mortem for Unrailed. Thank you very much.
Cool. Is it okay? Yeah, thank you for having us here today. I'm Thomas, this is Lukas. We want to give you our journey, our train journey of Unrailed. So everything started at the spring semester 2018 here at ETH, where we visited the Game Lab, which is a lecture of the Game Technology Center, which we can highly recommend. There at the beginning, you find a team, then you build you sketch some ideas, and this was one of our early sketches in Blender, done by Hendrik. And before you actually implement the game, you have to do some physical prototype of it, and it looked something like that. We used some metronome, and all the players had to move their stones at the same time. And afterwards, you can start implementing the game. And it looked very basic, something like this. This was one of the early working versions. And you're not just implementing it, but you also have to play test it with like other people than your actual team. And here we did some play testing at CAB. And in the end of the semester, all the groups have to do a presentation in front of a public audience. And I just want to quickly show that's how the game looked back then. I'm not sure who has seen it. I just want to show a short clip of it. And we did the final presentations, and I just want to show how our team looked like. We were 5 students back then, but things changed afterwards, and what changed and everything we will tell you now.
So after Game Lab, it was time for long decisions. So we had the final presentation. Afterwards, we got a lot of feedback on the game. Like a lot of people, even in that state, found the game extremely fun, and we were deciding, okay, shall we continue the game? Obviously, to you, we did continue the game, but one of the team members, Valentin, back then said that he has to continue courses at ETH, and he had to drop out because it would mean a rather big time commitment for ourselves. Afterwards, we were left with the question, how do we want to continue? Do we want to go for full time? Sorry, no. Okay. After that, we had to decide how we want to continue, if we want to continue this full-time or part-time. And for us, it was clear that if we want to continue this full-time, we would need to seek for external funding because we neither had the means nor did we want to fund ourselves. This was further complicated by the fact that we were separated across 3 different continents because me and Thomas did an exchange semester, which was planned beforehand. So between me and Thomas was a 12-hour time difference that made calling and things like that difficult at times. So during that time, we decided we want a publisher because we want to do that full-time So after that, we still had to decide what do we want to focus on. Do we want to go for online multiplayer, which is a lot of time to implement, or do we want to keep the game like it was before, like it's a smaller card game you can play locally? And if we do so, publisher were asking us to have more content because back then the content was rather dim. We had a lot of help during that time, especially from Pro Helvetia Interactive Media, which does a lot of support for starting game developers to get them in touch with industry, bring them to fairs and stuff like that. So during that time, we then decided, okay, we want to do online multiplayer. So we teamed up with Dedelic, who were interested in funding us for the whole time of development and wanted us to do the online multiplayer stuff. So that's what we did afterwards, and that's how we got here.
Yes, and then directly in February 2019, after the whole phase of how should we continue, we finally started in our small office at Technopark, which we could rent as ETH Spin-off. And yeah, we stayed there for quite a while now, and highly motivated. We want to improve the game, and one of the first things we wanted to tackle was basically improving the core gameplay loop. So that's how it looked like before, and we showed the game. We pitched it quite often for publishers, and also we showed it at several exhibitions already, and we knew kind of how the people reacted to it. But there were some reactions which we had to solve. So basically some people said, yeah, it's fun for the first 10 minutes or so, but what's actually the goal of the game? Or yeah, so it wasn't really clear for some people. And it seemed like we had to improve on that. And one of the ideas to improve on that was to, instead of revealing the whole map at once, to first introduce some short-time goals. And one of the goals basically is that it's very easy to explain somebody, yeah, just build to the next station and then we see what happens basically, instead of, yeah, just build as far as you can. And this improved already the game a lot. And we tested this, like changes like this, we tested already at the next exhibition. So we had the next exhibition where we implemented just this mode instead of the endless mode, and we could see how people react to it and so on. And that worked fairly well, even though I personally wouldn't have expected it. And then we also added this feature in the endless mode. So we only revealed part of the map to the next station, but we added some more things, some more like short-term goals the players had to do. One of them is the quest on the top left, which can be solved collaboratively usually, and some bonus objective, the bolt at the bottom. And all those things naturally led us to also add some kind of shop mechanism. Beforehand, we just had to got a random wagon at the stations, but now we have some bonus objectives. We wanted to incentivize players to do that, so we introduced the in-game, like session-based in-game currency, the bolts you see on the top there. And after collecting the bolts, you can go to the station, and there you enter shop mode. And also the shop mode was one of our key things, which weren't quite intuitive for us at the beginning, since we started doing some kind of classical user interface where all the players could vote. I want to have this and that and so on, but it didn't really fit into the game, like visually. And also it wasn't really clear when there's a voting mechanism who wants what or who's thinking what and so on. And in the end, we decided, like for the shop mechanism we saw here, where the players can just take something or they can just walk somewhere, and it's much more obvious what they want. But also if somebody buys something, you can try to dash them away, so it's an interactive way of buying things, like a mini game basically. The third part, and that's maybe one of the most important, was that we wanted also to add some kind of more complex progress to the game. Like the game-like version you see at the top, there we had the biomes just showed up randomly, like there was snow, then grass, and lava, like in any possible order, and the train speed increased the whole time, such that at some point people couldn't build the tracks fast enough such that they would crash. But it wasn't really, there wasn't really an end game or late stage of the game that wasn't really there yet. Because of that, we decided to make a strict order of the biomes and to let the player basically decide when to upgrade in the next biome. And this, to incentivize this upgrade, so why should he buy the new engine, we basically resetted the speed to some base value again. And this leads to a very nice like meta game mechanic where players have to decide at each station whether they should go for a more risky game where they stay in the same biome, get some more bolts and so on, or whether they play more safe and go just to the next biome. And this enabled us to have the game for casual players and also for very hardcore players in the end. Another small, like it's a big feature, but we don't have time to discuss it in detail, is online multiplayer. I just want to mention maybe the key feature we have, I haven't seen in other games, is we added communication via emojis and some kind of lines you can draw. And this has the nice advantage that we don't have a language barrier, we don't have to filter content for kids, and also works with the controller. So if you would have a controller and a text chat, you wouldn't be able to write anything. We also improved a lot the map generation, where we are now able to sample very complicated maps with different paths, and we are pretty certain that they are solvable. And yeah, if we go back to the timeline, we originally planned to release in June, but things changed a bit. So in March at GDC, we met another partner who was very interested in us. They're called Bilibili, and that's a major video platform in China. And we, in the end, could convince our publisher to make a sub-deal with them just for China, and all this discussion delayed our release about 3 months to September. And yeah, also our motivation went a lot down since we were working like every day and every night. And you don't get that much feedback, only sometimes at the exhibition, but then you have a lot of time in between. So it's sometimes a bit demotivating. You don't really see whether the product works or not. But Bilibili helped us a little bit to get us back motivated. And then?
So, and that leads us to Steam Early Access. So, state was that we were working on a game for 9 months now. As Thomas said, in the end, things got kind of rough, like motivation went down by some means. And it was, again, a decision time for one of our other team members, who then decided that he also had to continue his studies at ETH and could no longer be part of the team. So he dropped out actually 2 weeks before launch, and then it was only the 3 of us left. So we had some expectations. When we were like launching a game and with all the data we had, Steam wishlists and things like that, we expected, okay, we will make some financial gain, but not much, and by the end of the year, we should at least break even with the amount of money our publisher actually gave up front. And yeah, we would basically go back to ETH, continue our master thesis, or start our master thesis, which we all hadn't done at the point. And that was kind of the expectation curves. It's how many players we had per day, like maximum amount of players at once. What happened instead was slightly different. That's why we're here today, actually. It didn't went down in an exponential curve, but it stopped at some point, and then it went up again. And most interestingly here is that during launch, because of our Chinese co-publisher, most sales we did in China, versus starting in October, the whole thing shifted to the US and Europe, because actually a lot of streamers were picking up the game back then. So especially in October, our motivation went like up again, looks like this, and we started planning like new features to release in the game. Also, at the end of the year, for German-speaking people, that was quite fun. Like a friend of mine texted me and said, wait, you are on TV.
Momentan dein angesagtes Spiel?
Momentan spiele ich Unrailed.
What?
Unrailed.
So, if you know the show, that may ring a bell. So what will we do? The first thing we had to accept was that if you bring out a game, people won't play it in the way you intended them to play it, obviously. You had some ideas. So, for example, one idea we had is, because it's a roguelite, so you lose your progress when you crash, people will play for like 1 or 2 hours maximum. 2 weeks after launch, there were these guys. So 1 or 2 hours brings you like to 1,000 or 2,000 meters. They are here at 3,700 meters, playing for, I think, over 4 hours. At once, there was no saving or something. They just played it, and they got in a situation like this.
This lag.
Okay, I have iron.
Okay,
Oh, I had iron, but I dropped it.
We don't have resources. Go.
Because
Okay.
additionally, our game engine wasn't able to handle situations like this because we never
you got this.
expected
Just more
the thing
resources,
Come on,
guys.
more
to grow like
more
this.
resources, yes.
Also, they found like a lot of balancing things we hadn't seen before. And because if you play for so long and things like this, you get to know the balancing issues of the game and how you can succeed. So we try to rebalance the game a bit, and additionally we try to fix all these bugs. But knowing that people would play the game for such a long time, the most important update we made right after was save games. So you didn't need to play 7 hours in one go without dropping your internet connection, without going somewhere. So you could actually save the game and restart somewhere. And the other important feature for people like these were high scores, online high scores within the game, so you can compare yourself to other players. How far did they get? How far did you get? And you can even watch their replays if you select them in the menu. Additionally, even though we at the beginning didn't want to focus on that, a lot of people wanted to have a single-player mode. And normally we were not a big fan of the game in single-player because it basically lives from the fact that you scream at each other. You can't do that in single-player. We tried to do something like as close as we could get to the real experience by adding a bot, which basically follows your commands. It's still a different experience because you can scream at a bot, but I think it gets close enough to the real experience. And now there are people who say a bot is better to play with than a real person because it actually does what you tell them to do. Yes, so that's...
Then, pretty roughly 1 year later, in like 2.5 weeks ago, we finally came to the so-called full release. And there we did in Steam the full release. So in Steam, first we have had this early access status, which is kind of like telling the players it's a better game. But now we quite fully released it. So we said, yeah, that's kind of our final game now. And with that, we also released the Nintendo Switch version, the PlayStation 4 version, and in the coming weeks, the Xbox One version. So we are quite proud that that worked out. And we also added some more features, but also we don't want to get too much into detail. But for example, still to add even more on those problems with the goal, we added kind of some terminal station in Endless where people could figure out some secrets.
Shows. It's amazing. Wait, what is this?
Oh, we have to get one if we get all the special things. Levels. So we missed one on like this biome, the 4th biome. We missed one.
That was the nuclear one.
That's what those
David
things
S. Pumpkins.
are.
David S. Pumpkins level.
Okay.
Yeah, so to kind of add even some more meta gameplay level on top of it. And
shows. It's a
yeah. With that was kind of the major summary of our journey. We want to, since we still have a little bit of time, we added some things we never expected to do, which are quite fun. And Lukas starts with some technical details.
So for once, everybody knows the Pareto principle. And I remember back in GameLab in the end, somebody basically told me this, like, yeah, you done like 80% of the result, but only 20% of the work. This actually is our code base. So we 8-folded our code base in this 1.5 years of early access and programming beforehand. What this came from was a lot of networking. If you never written any networking engine before and then have to implement online multiplayer, that takes a lot of time. A lot of new content and map generation, what I said, just increased from like 5K lines to 20K lines. And also our biggest class, which is the character class in game, which is horrible to look at, was like quadrupled in code size. Yeah, this resulted in a lot of feature creep. And the best to explain you is, I think, the UI example. Okay, we have a designer, Hendrik, who makes all the designs for like all in-game UI and everything. And I started implementing him a nice escape menu, looking like this, but really, really simple. Then he got back to me and said, okay, if you can do this, can't you do this? Bit more complicated. We can do fancy animations, everything. And it has like dynamic content. And like that was the beginning. And then a month later, he came back with this, which is the online high score you just saw, which actually also has to access the internet, make some asynchronous requests, fill all the data, and stuff like that. So the solution we came up for was maybe not the best one, but we implemented our own style sheet. Which looks like this, is absolutely hated by Thomas. He wanted me to put out this line because nobody really knows what the comment means anymore. But it works. It looks, and all in-game UIs, which are a bit more complicated, are written in some JSON file. The other thing which is interesting about us is console porting. Why did we take like long for console porting? Okay, the classical pipeline you know from Unity maybe is Unity abstracts everything away more or less. They even have their own managed debugger. But internally they go from C#, compile it, go to the intermediate language representation, make C++, and then make native binaries for all the platforms. For us, from GameLab times, we used Monogame as a reminder. So no Unity. It's also C# though. So what we had to do was to implement this pipeline, but manually. So every step we had to do by ourselves. And boot is from the Monogame people, which is also like a transpiler from net intermediate representation language to C++. It bugs at times. You have to fix it manually. You have to debug the thing. There are bugs in C++. Auto-generated C++ code is a mess. So that took us a lot of time. So that's why we decided to only make the Switch port ourselves. The PS4 port and the Xbox One port were handed off to different companies, because the Switch port was actually technically the difficult, because we had to rewrite, I don't know, a quarter of the game or half of the game for that because of memory issues and things like that. But the other ones, we didn't want to have all the issues.
Yeah.
And then,
so next to some technical things, we have been to many exhibitions, to many more than we ever would have thought. And I tried to make a chart of it. And yeah, probably many of them weren't useful in the end, but still we learned a lot. And there are even more exhibitions, if we count them in, where our publishers were. So the white ones are all those where one of us actually physically attended. There are some interesting ones, like the Ludicious in 1 year ago, where we had Alain Bézet playing our game, and he even witnessed one of the early bugs where no map loaded, and then Lukas had to fix it quickly. We also did a lot of like props and merch for the booths, and we also thought we could, like the ducks or some of the small figures, we could hand them out as kind of flyers. And that's why we decided to log in Hendrik into the office for a week. And at the end, we bought a cut plotter and automated pre-cutting them. And then we could easily create many ducks. And this also made a lot of verschleiß at his desk, which is still visible today. And we didn't just go to exhibitions. We also, for the Chinese publisher, we made quite some videos of ourselves, which probably no one here has seen and which we also won't show here, since it's a bit cringy. And but you can find them somewhere on their Chinese internet page. And they also went to very big exhibitions for us, so we didn't attend there, but they invited like famous Chinese streamers, and they played for rather big audiences. That was in China Joy 2019, so it's the largest exhibition in China. And there's also maybe one of the coolest things personally, which happened to us at Hero Fest in Bern 2019, where we had a cosplayer cosplaying our penguin character. And another nice thing we had, not sure if you know it, but maybe you know the game Stardew Valley, and that was developed by a single developer in the US. And he wrote only one Steam review, and he wrote it about our game, which we are kind of proud of. That's pretty much what we wanted to tell you today.
Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your attention. If you have any questions, you can ask us now. If you want to know anything about the game, join our Discord, watch our Twitter channel, and yeah, we'll see each other.
Thank you very much for this very interesting and at times very relatable talk. Do we have any questions in the room? Yes. Oh.
Yeah, hi, thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask you, how do you decide on the player mechanics, like how a player has to play the game? Like on a computer, it might sound obvious that you just press WASD to move or whatever, but especially when you port it to a console, how does this process work?
Okay, maybe there are two parts, and I said a bit about that. So we had like the first part of development where we only developed mostly on our own and we tested on fairs. And I mean, you saw, for example, the whole thing we did do in early access with this complete new game mode, which was depending on short-term goals, was the outcome of playtesting at fairs. So, because at fairs, we had like people, and they were like, at Ludicious, it was the first fair we ever went to, we had like two kind of people. The people who would play the game for 4 hours straight, which is also not good at a fair, and people who would play for like 20 minutes and then lose interest. Because this track length or how far you go is kind of a really long-term goal, and immediately you lack like something to look forward to. So that's how we decided on these things. The fine grading balancing, if that's what you mean, that's something we did with the community after launch. That's what I said, like in the first few months, we had a really active speedrunning community on the game. Thomas can say a bit more about that.
Yeah, so, I'm still on. At the beginning, we went to a lot of exhibitions, and we got so much feedback. The people really, they came to us and said, yeah, maybe change that, would be cool if there's that, they just tell you. And afterwards, after the release, we used Discord, not sure if you know it, and there we have now a big community of 10K users. But even back then, we had like several hundred users, but they wrote super actively if they didn't like something, if they really liked something, and you got more feedback than you could process, actually. Does this answer the question? Okay.
Yeah. And maybe just one thing, for the core game plan, for the core game mechanics, that's what we came out of GameLab. Like the GameLab result was basically the core game mechanics. Everything else was changed anyway afterwards.
All right, next we have a question from one of our many online viewers.
The question is from Joshua, and he asks, how did you get in contact with Daedalic, and how did they react to your game? Did they play the game, and with whom of Daedalic did you have contact with?
I can answer the last question now. Carsten and Jonas. That may not say you anything, but answers your question.
So one of the boss and one of the product managers, basically, and it was at Games Connection Paris, so like the 4th exhibition we went to. It is a business-only exhibition. There you don't really have a booth. You just make as many appointments as you can at the beginning with all the people you might be interested in or who might be interested in you. And there we had many meetings. Hendrik went there, I don't know, let's say like 10 meetings or something, and then you basically pitch your game every time. And I think at this exhibition they didn't have the chance to play it, since I think he only had an iPad to pitch. So they just saw it on the presentation on a video at that point. But afterwards you make like follow-up calls, and then you also send them gameplay, you give them much more information. And then you also send them a build at some point, and they test it out themselves.
Also maybe worth to notice that all these fairs, especially in the beginning, where only Hendrik went to, were organized, like our visit was organized by Pro Helvetia Interactive Media, and they really do a lot of getting people in contact with industries. Because the issue in Switzerland is there is no industry in Switzerland. I mean, there are 2 big companies or one, but they don't invest, and there's no publisher or something. There's no money here.
Okay, next question.
Hi. Hi. Have you ever considered making a mobile port, since your controls look relatively simple?
Can I say that or not?
Yeah, so we actually made a mobile port back in GameLab.
Oh yeah, right.
It looks pretty cool on mobile. It even works with like controllers with Android, which is also quite neat. But there are several reasons we decided not to do it in the end. So there were some publishers who wanted to see it mobile, but we said at the beginning, no, we wanted more to go in the online multiplayer direction. And we personally think also by talking with many experts that it's even harder mobile to publish a game. So it's very hard to get visibility. Most of the games are free-to-play games. They have a lot of like content you have to buy and so on. And I think it's harder on mobile.
Yeah. Maybe to notice there was one maybe option, which I can't talk about, but one reason we didn't do is and I want to encourage that, is back then and even now we are a couch co-op game. And like we would need to get rid of the whole couch co-op setting. And we would become an online-only game, because on mobile, like the chances that 2 people in the same room have installed the same game is low, basically. Like, think about how hard it even is to get people to install apps on the App Store, with how much there is. Like, if you had a game which would only sell by like having a co-op multiplayer, that wouldn't work on the Play Store. It would work for you. Like if you have the game, you would give it to your friends and you would play together, yes. But getting a bigger community, that wouldn't work. And then we would have had an online-only game with a really weird camera perspective, which wouldn't have worked on mobile as well. So we don't say we will never make a version of it for mobile or something, but this game is hard to translate to mobile.
Thank you for your talk. I have two questions. My first question is, you guys met at the Game Lab, basically, or you started at the Game Lab. Would you have still developed this game if Game Lab was not part of it? Like if you did not decide to attend this Game Lab? Was it a goal of yours, or did that idea originate from the Game Lab?
Thanks for your question. That's a very good question. So for me personally, I wanted to do such a project again. That's why I visited Game Lab. But I think we could definitely say that this game would not have existed without Game Lab, since really the major ideas came from our discussions together at the beginning. And also I think Lukas didn't even visit the first lecture, and I had told him, hey, maybe try it out and so on. And yeah, so it was more, yeah, I think it was quite important actually at the beginning.
Like, I never planned to make it, to answer your question, I never planned to make a game, I never planned to go to the game industry or something. It was like one of my last semesters at ETH, planned once. And yet Thomas basically told me, yeah, come to the next Game Lab lecture, it looks interesting, look at it. And I came there and it was group assignment. So everybody had to assign himself to a group, and that's how I ended up with Game Lab at that point. And like, it was a really good experience. Game Lab is totally worth it. I can suggest everybody to do it. If you do it, you have to put a lot of time and effort in it, but I think the reward you get, even if you don't make a like fancy game or something, but the reward you get of having like nowhere at ETH you can build a full application like that.
I see, thank you. My second question is, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Tons of things, tons of things.
You mean the same game all over?
Yeah, the same game. Or just this entire like process, like building a game and then commercializing it.
Look, things we know today, we didn't know when we started. Like when we started, we had no idea about the industry, we had no idea how to pitch a game, we had no idea how to get money for a game, we had even no idea how things worked in like the background, like the whole thing you don't see. So I would say one thing I really have to mention is there's a lot of decisions, a lot of chances we got were luck. Like meeting Billy at GDC was luck. They basically, like I was standing at a booth at GDC and they came over to me and they said, yeah, we're one of the biggest Chinese video websites. Are you interested in cooperating with us? And I was like, Billy, I haven't heard of you. And they were kept pressuring and so the content came together, but that was pure luck that we met them there and things like that. Like what I said, like the game at the end of last year got like a lot of coverage from like especially German YouTubers. Which ended up that even like from like the brother of my childhood friend knew it from his YouTube videos he was watching. And then things like that is things you can control. And I would say, so these things we can't do differently much, but like talking to publishers, making plans, project management, and things like that. What engine we would took, what technical decisions we took, we would change that this time.
Yeah, but to sum it up, I think there are two parts. There's a business part. There we were quite new. If you would start now, you have like better ideas who would be a good partner. You directly target them early on. Second one is, I think we would start it maybe with Unity or something, which would make prototyping easier and faster. And we would start online from day one, since adding it later is difficult. Yep.
All right, we have another question from our online audience.
Did you ever consider switching the core game to Unity to make porting easier, or would that have been too much effort?
Yeah, we considered it, but we decided not to. I think it's the time where we had the decision phase. We tried out many things, and our first prototypes, especially also with the online engine, seemed well, even with monogame, and the more difficult parts came later, and we didn't expect it to be that difficult, since really the transpiling to C++ was not really working that way. You really have to change the transpiler to make it work. And I think that's major reasons why I would go to Unity, since this just took a lot of time.
Yeah. Maybe on a technical side note, we implemented, or like Thomas implemented, our first online multiplayer system, which at the end of early access, after a few months, was working amazingly well, but had the issue of creating tons of objects, which is a problem on depending on your garbage collector on like platforms like Switch. With limited memory. So we had basically, I had to rewrite like complete parts of it and make like the weirdest workarounds for it to become usable. And things like that, of course, hindsight is everything. If we would have known that beforehand, there were other approaches, we would have taken them. But that's what I said, like back then, of course, if you have experience that influences, if you've done something once, the next time you'll do it, you will be faster, maybe, to say it like that. And you will change your stances on things, obviously.
All right. There is another question from Joshua. What are your future plans for the game?
That's a good question. The answer is simple. We don't really look like for this game or for another game.
It says for the game. Yeah.
For the game. Oh, yeah, for this game, we are looking into cross-play at the moment, which seems to be feasible, but it's very hard to tell since the whole certification process with the console manufacturers is quite tedious. And I think we had some small ideas we wanted to add.
Yeah, like some small features to add. It all depends, okay. Someone in the talk I said that we still had to write master thesis. Thomas wrote his master thesis like at the beginning of the year, but me and Hendrik still have to, and we are currently doing that because actually we're running out of time for our master degree. And some of you may experience that before. So things will go slow for this time. Afterwards, it all depends on how big the user base is and everything. And yeah, that will be like what kind of updates we will push for the game. But honestly, after having this game around us for the last 2 years and 10 months, 2 years and 10 months, it's time for change. I've seen a lot of this game and I've seen it like often enough in that sense. I still would do updates, but I wouldn't do it as my main job for this game.
Thank you. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Do we have any in the room?
It's actually a follow-up question. You mentioned you were quite new to the business side of this project because you didn't plan on it. Did you get any support, especially like from ETH, or did you have to do it all yourself?
There has been. Slide.
Yeah, then go.
It's very ETH itself, not so much, but as I was talking about ProLVC Interactive Media, when Billy was later, but the first one was somewhere at the beginning. Here, oh, yes. ProLVC Interactive Media. If you want to publish a game and you are in Switzerland, talk to these guys. They can give you a lot of insights, especially they can give you some funding. Not enough to make a game, like really, if you want to live off something, but they can give you some seed funding, and then you have to pitch your game. Yeah. And they will prepare you for that. I think this year or last year they started even to do like pitch training and things like that. So before they go to fairs, they will have somebody who is experienced check your slides, give you tips and everything, how to like make a basic business plan and things like that.
Yeah. So basically, ProLVC, then Ludicious, they also had an accelerator program we took part of, but that's mostly pitch training and so on. Yeah. And then finally, Spin-off. They do quite nothing. Like for us, for example, that sounds nice, but really, the only thing we learned from them is doing a business plan early on, since they wanted to have a business. This was good, but we didn't get any feedback or so. And
Spin-off has things for people who want to work with the industry. I mean, in Switzerland, it's not that common to do customer-based projects, and I mean, we could get like. Over them, I think you can get access to this ETH for industry relations and things like that, which are really important if you want to pitch to industry, because then ETH is a name you want to pitch with.
Or if you need a laboratory, you get easier laboratory since it's expensive, but we rented a room and it's not cheap. It's also 500 francs a month, and we could have get the same room for like 100 francs more in the next building, for example. So it's nice, but it didn't help much. But Pro Helvetia and Ludicious, I think, were very important.
All right, we have a last short question.
Okay. Have you considered doing another game after having done this game? Or are you planning to do one?
So yeah, Lukas and Henrik is doing their master's thesis now, so they are not working on it. I'm looking into some ideas, but yeah, I don't really know. So maybe not. It would be fun, but if we don't find a good idea, probably not. But we will keep you posted. Oh, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I would say thing is we would really need to, like, we wouldn't do it like we did it the last time, obviously, but we would really need to have some good idea and something we are all convinced of. And so, for example, we may not do a second part to Unrailed, but I mean, it's still up, but that may be not enough, not interesting enough to do for another 2 years.
But maybe Unrailed remastered in 10 years or something.
We will definitely be looking forward to the remaster. And on that note, we would like to thank you very much for attending VIScon, for your wonderful talks, and for your wonderful questions. As a parting gift, we have some exclusive VIScon mugs.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know.
It's okay.
Is it good? Take the right way around. All right. Thank you very much for coming to VIScon.
Yeah, thank you for organizing. Thank you.
Thanks.